Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Mila D'Antonio, Editor-in-Chief of One-to-One Media, and I'm here today with one of the customer experience greats, Don Peppers. Hi, Don.
Hi, Mila.
You know Don as the co-founder of Peppers & Rogers Group. He and co-founder Martha Rogers are often credited with having launched the CRM revolution with their very first book, The One-to-One Future. And he remains a prolific author and writer to this day. He's considered one of the top 100 LinkedIn influencer bloggers and has been busy working on a new book, which just came out. So, Don, why now? What inspired you to write this book, and can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I think that the primary reason I think this book was called for is because of all the hubbub about the subject of customer experience. These days, many more corporations have chief customer experience officers, vice presidents in charge of customer experience, and you have customer experience management, CXM, as a new discipline. People are talking about it. So one of the issues really is the question of what exactly is a customer experience and why are we thinking of it in such why are we so consumed with the issue? And I think fundamentally it's because we're trying to manage our business from the customer's point of view. Customer is not familiar with our marketing silos and our sales processes and our customer service protocols. The customer only sees the experience that he or she has with the product and service and its concomitant offerings. And so trying to visualize a business from the customer's point of view is fundamentally trying to put yourself in the customer's shoes and experience your brand, your product, the way the customer experiences it. A lot of people are worried about this, not worried so much as concerned with the issue. They're trying to reorient their organization charts. They're trying to instill new disciplines within the organization. I just thought it was something that was worth writing about.
I mean, I agree with you. It's a critical moment in time for this book, and I do think it's important for companies to take a moment to walk in their customer's shoes, which I think many companies don't do enough of. There's a whole chapter in the book that touches on technology's role in the customer experience movement, and you go a step further and discuss how the pendulum needs to swing back to the humanity side of delivering that customer experience. So how important is it for organizations to empower and train their associates to incorporate that human element into their strategies and do what's best in the best interest of customers?
Well, I think it's vital. I think that's a vital element of managing a better customer experience is making sure that you empathize with the customer. Human beings can empathize with others. Robots and automation systems don't. You can simulate empathy, but it's simulated empathy. So let me give you a very quick example. When you try to buy a book from Amazon that you already bought before they sell it to you, you'll get a message. You already bought this book. Are you sure you want to buy it again? Now, that is an empathetic message to a customer. It's a message based on earning the customer's trust. It's a message based on treating the customer the way you'd like to be treated if you were the customer, sort of person to person. But it's not a person sending that message out. It's a line of code that the buyer gets. And that line of code, it encapsulates the empathetic nature of the code author's intentions, okay? The people who wrote the code, the people who programmed that piece of automation, they hardwired empathy into their system. To the extent that you can automate those hardwired empathy and trust elements into your code, that's great. But inevitably what will happen is there will be instances where something falls through the cracks, some event is encountered which wasn't anticipated, and so it wasn't planned for, so it doesn't have a planned response. There's no at every failure point, you need real people making real human decisions. And I think that's fundamentally going to become even more important the better we get at technology to begin with. Think of it this way. I just heard an NPR story the other day about a big call center company increasingly bringing its call centers back to the United States from overseas, primarily because the routine kinds of calls that you used to make a call into a call center and handle some routine change in your account or whatever, those kinds of calls increasingly are being handled by online automated tools. You go to the website, you do something. When you need to make a call to somebody, it's because their automation failed in some way or it wasn't adequate to handle what you're looking for. Therefore, the calls that you make are inherently more complicated and more complex, and deal with more complex issues than simple routines. And in those kinds of situations, you need people to listen, maybe to commiserate, as well as to solve a problem that might require a lot more than simply connecting up to 2 or 3 different lines of code. And so the human touch is going to be increasingly important the faster and better our automated systems become.
Right, and you really touched on something there, and that is that ultimately customers really just want their problems to be solved, which is why it is important to empower associates to solve those problems, to have that first resolution. But it's also, like you said, important to take the friction out of the customer experience. So can you talk about what's involved in delivering a frictionless customer experience today?
First of all, let me suggest, let me just show you a couple of charts here. I want to show you a couple of charts that were in the book, The Effortless Customer Experience, The Effortless Experience, and it was basically by some guys who work for something called the Corporate Executive Board. So it's a private company, but they did this research. They looked at 97,000 different consumers, and what they asked was something like, what's the likelihood you'll tell a friend about a particular customer experience? And if it's a product experience, then they found that people are twice as likely to tell a friend about a good product experience as a bad product experience. But if it's a customer service experience, the statistic is reversed. Then they're more than twice as likely to tell a friend about a bad customer service experience than a good customer service experience. Think of it this way. You buy a new iPhone 6S, you call your friends and brag about it. It's a fantastic device. This machine is, it's a jewel. It's great. And you sort of feel good because about yourself for having made the decision and taken the investment and so forth. That's a product experience. You're proud of it. But you're not going to call a friend and brag about what a great call you just had with the Comcast service representative, okay? No matter how good that service representative was, it's not the kind of thing you would tell friends about. Instead, you're much more likely to tell your friends about a bad customer service experience. Now, there's a lesson in here for marketers. And what that lesson is yes, when it comes to your product, the actual physical product and the actual physical service you deliver to someone, that is something that you want to delight the customer with. You want the customer to be absolutely delighted. But the customer service behind that product or service, okay, that's something where you want to suck the friction out of that. You want to make sure that operates just flawlessly as possible, because that service experience is an opportunity to lose a customer. It's not an opportunity. You're not going to gain customers because you have flawless customer service, okay? You're just not going to lose them as fast, okay? The world is full of companies that deliver reasonably good customer service. So just because you deliver reasonably good customer service doesn't mean your customer is going to stay loyal. They can go somewhere else and get it the same way. But as soon as you screw up the customer service, your customers are going to look for someone else, and they're not going to have any problem finding someone else. So customer loyalty and customer satisfaction are just not very highly correlated. But it's customer disloyalty that is very highly correlated with customer dissatisfaction. So dissatisfaction and disloyalty are what's correlated. The lesson there is you want to make your customer experience as frictionless as possible if you want more customer loyalty. Let me illustrate this with a story. A colleague of mine is a management consultant, and he specializes in handling the affairs, the marketing and customer service strategies for retail chains and for companies that sell in to retail chains. Okay, that's his business. He watches the retail chain business. He told me that one Saturday afternoon during Christmas season, he was out shopping for some new running shoes, and he went into an athletic shoe store, looking at the shoes that he was going to buy, and it was a very crowded shoe store that day. It was a Saturday afternoon during Christmas season. It was really jammed. Everybody was busy. All the salespeople were occupied. They all had 2 or 3 people in front of them. So my friend said he took his place in line behind a couple other people waiting to see this one salesman. And my friend said that the first guy in line was a tall gentleman and looking at some basketball shoes, and he had his eye on some Nike basketball shoes. And he pointed him out to the salesman, and the salesman made him a pitch for a different brand, an off-brand. This is a brand my friend had never heard of before. The salesman basically said, yes, sir, Nike makes a great basketball shoe, but have you heard about the brand New American? They make a terrific basketball shoe, and I know it's an off-brand. It's about half the price of Nike, but my clients really like it. And if I bring them out, I bet you try them on, and I bet you like them. So he brought out the New American shoes, and my friend said that the guy tried them on. He liked them. He wasn't particularly brand conscious. They were half the price of the Nikes, and he bought them and he left. So he's a happy customer. And then the next person up was a young woman looking at some cross trainers, and she had her eye on some Reebok cross trainers. And my friend said the salesman, the shoe salesman in the store, made her exactly the same pitch. Basically said, yes, ma'am, Reebok makes a great cross trainer, but you haven't tried New American. Have you ever heard of that? They have a great cross trainer. He brought them out. She tried them on. Again, half the price of the Reeboks. She bought them, and she left. So now it's my friend's turn to get served by the shoe salesman. And by this time, his curiosity is really aroused because obviously what's happened here is something quite phenomenal. This brand that my friend had never heard of before, New American, and frankly, I don't remember the name of the brand he mentioned. It was something like that. But this brand he'd never heard of obviously had cracked the code with respect to getting the loyalty of these shoe store salespeople. They were doing something right in order to get their brand so heavily promoted, right? The shoe store basically is the customer of the shoe manufacturer here. So my friend wanted to know what was the shoe manufacturer's secret. What were they doing? Maybe it was a contest, or could have been a special commission. So when it's his turn, he said, "Look, I couldn't help but notice that you just served an off-brand to the 2 customers in front of me, got about half the revenue they were willing to pay, and it's kind of my business, and I sort of wanted to know what New American's secret was. What are they doing?" And the salesman said, "Oh, no, there wasn't anything." And he said, "No, was it like a commission? Is it a contest?" Well, it's a contest, right? And the salesman said, "No, don't." And he looked around kind of cautiously. He said, "Look, don't tell my manager." And the man said, my friend said, "No, I won't. I just want to know. It's my business. I want to know what are they doing." So the salesman looked around the store. He was really exasperated. It was very busy, very crowded. He said, "Look at the store on a Saturday afternoon during Christmas season." He said, "It's so crowded, I don't have time to go to the bathroom on a Saturday afternoon." Then he turned to my friend and he said, "New American, when they ship their shoes to the store, the laces are already in them." And that's frictionless customer experience. Exactly. So what I tell my clients is, do you ship your shoes with the laces in them, or do you make your customers lace up their own shoes? One is a frictionless experience. One isn't so frictionless.
It's something as simple as that that's probably often overlooked.
Yes. Yeah. Very.
So if you were a brick-and-mortar retailer, then how would you ensure that you're taking the friction out of the customer experience and not overlooking such simple tasks, but also making a human element prominent to ensure that customers' problems are being solved quickly?
Well, I'd start by looking at the basic elements of a frictionless experience. Wait a minute, go back here. There are 4 attributes of a frictionless customer experience, in my view, that you've got to pay attention to. First is a frictionless experience is reliably good. It's a reliability experience, reliable. Okay, so the product works as advertised. There's no hidden flaws, no failures. Obviously, in a frictionless experience, if the product doesn't work, people aren't going to be happy with it, and it's ultimate friction. But also, there's got to be, good value for money, basically for both sides of the value proposition. And I'm not talking about having to be the least expensive product in your category at all. I'm really talking about having a value that's appropriate to the quality of the product. Something that's not tricky to understand, something that's not hard to grasp in terms of value for money. Let me just give you an example of value for money. There's a mutual fund company that those customers access it online a lot. And what they wanted to do was make sure that those transactions are as frictionless as possible, so they're valuable to the customers. What they noticed, what happened was they put together a customer experience improvement budget under the administration of the Vice President of Customer Experience, and that budget could be easily tapped for small projects, on the approval of the Vice President themselves, without requiring board approval or anything else, up to a few tens of thousands of dollars per project. And one of the call center representatives noticed one day that some of his customers were having trouble logging into their website in the IVR, and he talked to a colleague, another call center rep, and she had noticed the same thing. So on their own initiative, they got authorization for a $20,000 expenditure to go to the software vendor for the IVR, fix that problem, and now they're diverting $4 million worth of calls a year, basically. They're handling $4 million worth less in operating costs with that small change. That's an example of value in the customer experience, equating the customer experience to value. I think the third quality is relevance. A really good customer experience is one that I don't have to tell the company the same thing over and over again. And the classic relevance bugaboo I have is when you're on the phone, you dial in, you have to enter your account number on your handset in order to get access. You identify yourself, and then eventually you talk to a person, and the first thing you have to tell them is your account number again, which you already told them the first time. That's an example. And every time that happens to anybody, and it happens all the time to lots of customers all around the world, every time that happens, the customer says, well, here's another company that doesn't know it's in blank from a hole in the ground. They don't know me nearly as well as I know them. Sorry?
It's amazing how often that still happens.
Exactly. It's amazing, isn't it? It's just amazing. And the fourth quality, I would say, is trustability. That is that a really good customer experience is one that is trustable. And when I use the word trustable, I'm talking about being proactively trustworthy, proactively watching out for your customer's interest. I buy a lot of books from Amazon. It's a really frictionless experience. I go online. I see a book I ought to get. I go to Amazon. I click on the book. It comes to my house. They already got my address, my credit card number. Very, very frictionless. And one time I did go and order a book that I'd already bought before, and I got this message from Amazon. You already bought this book. You sure you want to buy it again? No, I don't want to buy it again. And now, when you think about it, my experience with Amazon is even more frictionless, because not only don't I have to give them my address on my credit card, I don't even really have to check whether I have the book or not. They'll tell me if I have it. In fact, just this morning I had a conversation with a colleague, and we were talking about Don Tapscott's new book, Humans Need Not Apply. And I thought, I think I just ordered that book, but I'm not sure. So I went to Amazon to order it again just to see if I'd already got it, and I did. So I've already got it on the way. So that's an example of a very frictionless customer experience, and I think that's what we're talking about here. So reliable, valuable, relevant, and trustable. That's a very frictionless customer experience. Now, you asked about what that means with respect to retail chains. Let me just go here. Is this where we are on the slides?
I'm curious, Don. Yes, so go ahead. I'm curious about how companies are infusing the human element. And it's a big debate today in terms of people automatically think that technology removes friction, but the human element still is very important. So how are companies, retailers, balancing that?
Well, it's interesting. Retailers are all down in their cups because they think that online retailers have all the advantages. And from a cost and operations standpoint, there's no question that an online retailer has immense advantages over a chain of retail stores, because the retail stores can't even approach the low per unit inventory costs and shipping costs and so forth that the e-commerce vendors have. The buying power of Amazon is it must be approaching the buying power of a company like Walmart today, and so these online vendors are very, very threatening to the brick and mortar. But the brick and mortar people have something that's really, really important, and it's an important advantage that they're not taking advantage of with respect to e-commerce vendors, and that is people. They've got human beings in their store who could, in fact, play a role of commiserating with customers, of empathizing with them, of getting in their heads and understanding them face to face. And yet, from my standpoint, most retailers aren't really trying to maximize that advantage. If anything, they're trying to minimize the number of people that are required because they look at people as a cost of doing business rather than as an opportunity to build relationships, human relationships based on empathy and trust with customers. If you were going to empower your employees to build relationships with customers, there are lots of technologies available for you to. I ought to be able to pick up the phone and contact the mobile phone of the sales rep I just talked to this morning at the department store or at the electronics store. I mean, why can't I do that? Why can't I actually have a relationship with an individual in a store? I think to a certain extent, the brick and mortar retailers have kind of been seduced by the ease of doing business in an automated fashion, when in fact it is easy, but it's also fraught with difficulty because of the lack of human connection, the lack of interaction you're going to have with human beings. And if I ran a brick and mortar store, there are a number of strategies that you could follow to try to compete with online retailers. First of all, you got to make sure that your online offering is, if not the exact equivalent of an e-commerce vendors, it's got to be close anyway. It's got to be really convenient for your customers to go into your store, see a product, and then order it from you rather than order it from Amazon. Or from some other e-commerce vendor. So first, have a reasonably frictionless, decent, reasonably low cost. Doesn't have to be rock bottom, but needs to be reasonably low cost e-commerce offering as a brick and mortar store. But second, I empower the in-store employees to sort of hybridize the efficiency of the online offering with the empathy of a human interface. So at the retailer John Lewis in the UK, for instance, one of the things they do with their store people is they provide them with tablets. They have tablets, and with my tablet, if I'm a John Lewis salesperson, I can call up the actual offering that the customer right in front of me saw when they're looking at our website online. I can see this particular customer's prior preferences. I can interact with them. I can see the click stream, and I can actually have a conversation in the store that sort of continues their online search. So that's an example. I would also, if I were selling, let's say, complex products, I would try to incorporate service, installation, and repair services. So Best Buy operates Geek Squad. It's a really good example of that, where you can buy a complex product at Best Buy, but then, rather than just, getting launched into your living room and you're trying to figure out how to set it up, you get Geek Squad to come in and do it, and that's something that's a real advantage, especially for retailers with really local presence. We deal here in Georgia, where I live. I could buy from an online vendor or a big box retailer, but I buy from a small, not too small, but basically a large mom and pop consumer electronics retailer, because they're going to come over and fix my home theater system if I need it. Okay, they're gonna fix it. Another thing you could do to maximize the sort of the human element in retailing is to think about the shopping experience itself and try to create a real human experience out of it with events, like in a bookstore, book signing, let's say, or put the coffee shop in the front of the store and let people gather there, congregate there. I think Starbucks is perfect as an example of this. Of course, you're not going to order hot coffee online, but Starbucks, their stores are experiences. You go in, you get your Wi-Fi. And Starbucks is one of the first with Wi-Fi and that kind of thing. And finally, I think trustability is really critical. And I think in an online environment, trustability is in the code. And if it's been coded in, great. If it hasn't been, good luck. But in a retail environment, trustability is in the eyes, okay? Meeting customers eye to eye, face to face. I think that's a real advantage for many companies, and it's overlooked.
Great pieces of advice, Don, and hopefully we'll see some of these being implemented this year for sure. Just wrapping up, what other trends do you predict we'll see as they relate to that topic of balancing the technology with the human element in the customer experience?
I think you can look for companies to really try to maximize their human multipliers. They're going to look for human qualities like empathy, initiative, purpose, creativity. They're going to look at those kinds of human qualities and see how can we position ourselves so that we expose our humanity to our customers as opposed to simply our machinery.
I love that. Well, thank you, Don, so much for speaking with me today, and thanks for everyone for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Much obliged. Thanks, Mila.
Great.